Perspectives on Successful Executive Sponsorship. I'm Sylvia Perez-Cass, HACR's Senior Vice President of Operations, and we have a very exciting session for you today with 4 phenomenal leaders. Moderating today's session is HACR's President and CEO, Sid Wilson. Please join me in welcoming back Sid Wilson. Thank you. Hi, Sid.
Good morning, Sylvia. And good morning, everybody. And we are so excited for this kickoff session of our set executive programs. My first speaker that we'll be having a fireside chat with is Christopher Fernandez. He is responsible for all human resource matters for a wide portfolio of global businesses in Microsoft's core research and engineering teams. His charter ranges from hardware to Windows, Office, gaming, and artificial intelligence and research groups, and several other global product groups and teams. He's also the human resource executive for Microsoft Silicon Valley and San Francisco campuses, as well as Microsoft's Vancouver campus and India's and China's engineering research teams. So without further ado, please welcome Christopher Fernandez from Microsoft.
Hi, Sid.
Christopher, good morning.
Good morning to you as well. I'm grateful for the invite to be with you and be with HACR today, as well as my fellow panelists.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know you're somewhere in the world, so whatever time zone you're in, it's either good morning or good afternoon if it's the next day, if you're somewhere on the other side of the world.
It's on the week and the month ordinarily, but during the pandemic, we've stayed mostly in Michigan, but we'd ordinarily be in Redmond, Washington.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent. So Christopher, can you share your experiences rising up the executive ladder, and can you talk about whether, as you rose up, whether you had the support of mentors, sponsors, or a combination of both?
Yes, definitely. Both mentors and sponsors, and they both played unique roles. From a mentorship standpoint, it was really guiding and giving perspective along the way, whether it be on career-related matters, leadership development matters, many issues and opportunities to guide and help me in my own career. Different from sponsorship. Sponsorship, I've had sponsors who have intentionally tried to play an advocacy role in lining up my expectations with the mentoring that I was receiving toward an end goal or objective. In both cases, mentors and sponsors have played an important role, and at this point in my career, I do that very much so with many individuals, playing a mentor role for them as well as a sponsorship role.
Thank you, Chris. Can you talk about how important it is to receive executive sponsorship as you rise up the corporate ladder?
I think it's critical. I think one can have aspirations and can work diligently and earnestly toward those aspirations, but it's extremely beneficial to have someone who's there assisting and enabling you as you move along. That can be accomplished by many ways, but one key way is the individual being clear about their expectations, stating their aspirations forthrightly, and then partnering with the sponsor about a plan. And when I say a plan, I mean a plan with intentionality, sort of a plan of record that says, here's where I want to be and how can I get there? Now, most career steps are not linear. You tend not to go from the starting point to the ultimate point of your goal or your outcome that you're trying to achieve in a linear fashion. It takes various routes, circuitous turns and dips along the way. But the key is having a plan and partnering with that sponsor or sponsors. More often than not, there's more than one. That's been my experience. I've had many sponsors who then can partner with you to enable you to achieve that outcome or set of outcomes that you're hoping to land.
Thank you, Christopher. Can you share your perspectives on the difference between a mentorship relationship versus an executive sponsorship? And does executive sponsorship evolve from a mentorship, or does it happen independently of a mentorship relationship?
I think it can evolve organically over time, for certain. The relationship that you establish both with a mentor or mentors and a sponsor or sponsors, I think the ones that I have found to be the most beneficial are the ones that naturally occurred over time. They occurred through natural interactions. Again, going back to what I said a moment ago, myself being forthright about a plan and then collaborating with a mentor in service to that plan the mentor really giving the guidance from a professional development standpoint, the sponsor really playing an enabling role, an advocacy role. For certain, a mentor and a sponsor can evolve into the reverse roles. The key along the way, at least in my own personal experience, this may not be true for everyone, is being forthrightly explicit about your expectations and then making that known to the sponsor who will play that advocacy role, and then making it known to the mentor who will help guide you in service to your professional development and ultimately the outcomes you aspire to achieve.
Well, thank you, Christopher. And I love the the idea of really laying a plan for this and using it as part of your strategy. So I really, I think our attendees really appreciate that, those pieces of advice. Here's a question that comes up rather frequently, especially within the Latino community. We're often taught not to boast or self-promote about our achievements and to let our work just speak for itself. And however, in corporate America, we often know that if unless you share your achievements, your mentor and your sponsor may not be able to share that with the higher ups. Can you share how, in your opinion, what do you think is the right balance between illuminating your achievements while also letting your work speak for itself, or if it's one or the other?
It's a great question, Sid. It's a great question. I think, first, let me say this just declaratively. I think it's super important for one, as I've alluded to a few times, to be explicit about what they hope to achieve, what their aspirations are, professionally and otherwise, both in service to enabling the mentor to help guide you, as well as the sponsor to help play an advocacy role. Now, that being said, there's ways to engage with those mentors and those sponsors that is, in my approach, the way I approach this has been, it's rooted in the work. So I'll engage with mentors and sponsors as I was moving through my career. And similarly, I've encouraged those who I now mentor and sponsor to talk about the work that they're doing. This is partially, as you alluded to a moment ago, it's an educational opportunity for the mentors and the sponsors to understand who they're working with, what those accomplishments are, where their strengths are, where their opportunities for development are, not in a way that's just, to use an expression, just sort of waving your own flag and you're self-promoting, but rather genuinely expressing what you're working on, what you've done professionally, where you see opportunities, essentially knowledge exchange with the sponsor and or mentor in service to refining your ideas, creating clarity and intent around what your focus is in terms of professional growth and development and potentially advancement, depending upon your focus. But doing so rooted in the work itself and the conversations. I'll end this question the way I started the answer to this question, which is, I think it's important for one to speak openly to mentors and sponsors so they know what your aspirations are. Otherwise, and to say it in a very simple way, how would they know otherwise? To assume that the mentor or sponsor will know intuitively or innately what the person that they're mentoring or sponsoring really wants is something that I would not just fully bet my career on. I would much rather have them be explicit, and I definitely have learned that over the years. Early on in my career, I was more hesitant to be as forthright, and I learned over time as I talked to mentors and sponsors. They would often inquire, so Chris, what are you interested in? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to go? Developmentally, career-wise, if you want to advance vertically, what does that mean to you? And I learned over time with talking to those mentors and those sponsors, it helped them. So it wasn't so much that I was just waving, to use a phrase again, waving my own flag. It was helpful to them because then, as you alluded to, said they could then be informed and they could play a partnership role with me, again, whether it be developmentally from a mentorship standpoint or advocacy from a sponsorship standpoint.
Thank you. That's excellent advice. One question is, I want to talk about success stories, and I'll share just a quick one of my own. I was the benefit of executive sponsorship when early in my Wall Street career, and I was working in the mailroom. A person wanted to ask play golf, and I played golf with them, spent 4 hours, and next thing you know it, he was like, "Hey, we should talk." That person wound up being my sponsor for 21 years. As I rose up the corporate ladder, and just some examples of this, because this person got to hear about the things that I was interested, just as you were talking about. But can you share any success stories, either on your own or general observations of executive sponsorships that have yielded positive career outcomes?
Oh, for sure. So when I was in graduate school, earning my master's in human resources and labor relations at Michigan State, I met a professor in the program who was at the time the director of the program, and he and I have stayed in contact literally for, it's going on 27, 28 years. And his role as a mentor has been consistent. He's somebody that I go to and can rely on for perspective and insight. And as I moved from consulting after graduate school to General Motors, and then ultimately here to Microsoft, along the way, he's been such a great partner to me, and I've relied heavily on that partnership. There are other examples that I've seen with colleagues that I've worked with. When I was in Switzerland for a few years with General Motors at the time, I was living and working there. I connected with a few people there from a professional standpoint, and we've stayed in contact through that entire time as their careers have evolved. And I've tried to play in earnest the role of mentor with them, and to the extent possible, advocacy while I was at GM, and now here at Microsoft, continuing to play a mentorship role with them. The feedback I've received has been that this is very beneficial. My own experience has been it's very beneficial to establish those close connections, those close relationships in service to growth and development. I think it's fundamental to one's career.
Well, thank you. Can you, with about 2 minutes that we have left, can you share how executive sponsors may enhance opportunities to serve on boards, whether it's for-profit or even non-for-profit boards?
Sure. So, sponsorship at its core is, to use this operative term I've used a few times now, is advocacy. And I think one aspect of advancement into the executive ranks is participating on boards. Having the base knowledge of how to function on a board from a corporate governance standpoint is critically important. I think to the extent one can, becoming knowledgeable of how boards function, what the role of the board is, the intent behind boards is fundamental to being a participant on a board, a valuable participant on the board. But to get onto the board, once you have that baseline understanding, that baseline education around board participation, having a sponsor or an advocate that can help guide you toward a board would be extremely helpful, and has been extremely helpful. I've talked to many people. I've been involved with some nonprofits, particularly on nonprofit boards. And as I recruited other board members into those nonprofits, one of the things that's been, I think, critical to them is having somebody to play that advocacy role for them. I do want to say, though, having the base knowledge is super important. Functioning on a board as in your fiduciary responsibilities needs to be rooted in the knowledge of how a board functions. And once you have that, as I said, then advocacy to get on the board, being recruited onto a board, having an advocate in service to that is critical, at least in my own experience.
Well, thank you, Christopher. With the last few moments, any last final remarks for our attendees on any additional advice on the power of executive sponsorships?
First is HACR is a wonderful organization, and to the extent you can continue to engage with HACR as a learning opportunity, I would encourage you to do so. I'd also say what is critically important is what we started off, your first initial set of questions to me, Sid, and that is, be clear about your career growth and aspirations. Write it down. Have a plan of record. Realize the plan of record is not static. It's dynamic. It will change as your career evolves, as you evolve professionally, as you work with others. Know that the path is, at least in my experience, never going to be linear from point A to ultimate destination point B. It'll take various turns, and and different routes along the way, but know directionally where you're heading. Partner with others, seek out mentors, seek out individuals who can play sponsorship roles, and always be clear. Always be clear about what you aspire to achieve. Know it yourself, express it to others, and work towards that end goal would be my advice. My last comment is if anybody ever wants to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to connect with others. You can feel free to do that as well.
Well, Christopher, thank you so much. And of course, a big shout out to the Big Ten. You went to Michigan State University. I went to the Ohio State University. So I say, go Spartans for you, go Buckeyes for me, but go Big Ten. All right.
Indeed. Take care, Sid.
Yeah. So thanks again, Christopher Fernandez from Microsoft. So thank you so much. So now our next fireside chat will be with Valerie Love. Valerie is a trusted advisor and passionate leader with demonstrated experience in the areas of talent, performance and management, organizational design, succession planning, and compensation, mergers and acquisitions, all at the Coca-Cola company. So Valerie is in prior to human resources. Valerie has also had extensive work experience in finance, operations, labor relations, where she successfully built and developed a world-class business team across different industries. Valerie's passion is rooted in her belief that talent, leadership, and culture are keys to successful businesses. So everyone, please welcome Valerie Love with the Coca-Cola Company.
Hi, Sid. So good to be here with you and great seeing you again. Thank you so much for inviting me to this very important conversation.
Well, thank you, Valerie, and thank you so much to you and to the Coca-Cola Company. Love the chair, by the way.
Thank you.
That's great. So Valerie, I want to ask you, similar questions. Can you share your experiences as you rose up the corporate ladder? And did you have the support of mentors, sponsors, or a combination of both?
Yeah, this is a really important question. And I did. I was fortunate enough to have mentors early in my career, even before I knew they were mentors, and sponsors as well. And what became really important to me was making sure I was cultivating the relationships with those mentors. It was as much my ownership as theirs to stay connected, to have meaningful conversations, to talk about my aspirations and what my critical gaps were in capabilities and how I would be very intentional about how I would progress. I made sure that I talked about what my aspirations were, and they have evolved over time. The more experiences I obtained, the more I learned what I did want to do and what I did not want to do. And there is a big difference between mentors and sponsors. Mentors, you form those relationships, and it's an ongoing ownership between you and others as mentors. Sponsors, you may know who they are initially, and you may not. Those are the individuals who've watched you, seen your experiences, watched you develop, know some of the things that you've delivered upon and what your aspirations are. And they may be speaking about you and you have no idea your name is coming up in the room. So both are very critical players in your career trajectory.
Well, thank you. Can you talk about how important it is to receive executive sponsorship as you rise up the corporate ladder? And I really love what you shared about the fact that you may not always know who your executive sponsor is. And can you talk about that and how important it is to receive that sponsorship to rise up the corporate ladder?
Yeah, it's really important because a lot of the talent decisions and career discussions happen in private settings with key leaders to talk about talent, what potential opportunities they may progress to. And so having that visibility and exposure to a variety of leaders so that they can speak to what their experiences have been with you and what they know to be true about your aspirations is critically important. So I learned early on that, sometimes your name comes up in a room and you didn't even realize the person knew as much as they did about you. So being on projects, being on different leadership teams and working on different initiatives allow a broad variety of leaders and influencers to have access to you and be able to speak on your behalf.
Great. Can you talk about, in your opinion, the difference between a mentorship relationship versus executive sponsorship, and does executive sponsorship evolve as a result of mentorship, or does it happen independently?
I think the sponsorship can evolve from a mentorship relationship where, as the career progresses, there are more conversations that may not be part of a formal or informal mentorship, but the sponsor continues to advocate for you as you progress in your career. I think you have to be very intentional about how you leverage mentorships and sponsorships. I use my mentorship relationships as a mentor and as a mentee to bounce ideas, brainstorm, talk about the possibilities, the wonders, what could be possible in careers and what things you may want to hone in on to master in a specific area. When I learn about sponsorship, relationships, and I want to make sure I've got the right connection points. So as my aspirations or my career trajectory changes, they remain informed about what I aspire to do and what I look to gain in different opportunities. So I think you have to be very intentional and purposeful regarding those relationships, and you have to own it. It takes nurturing and cultivating. It takes work on both parts of the mentor and the mentee and the sponsor relationships to make sure you have a vested interest in making sure that it progresses in the right way.
Well, thank you, Valerie. One question is often in our communities, we've been taught to just let our work speak for itself. Don't speak up, don't boast, don't self-promote. But without sharing your successes, your executive sponsor may not know how to talk about you. Can you talk about how you balance between speaking up about your successes and achievements without appearing like you're boasting or self-promoting?
That's a very powerful question, Sid. And I wish someone were here to tell this to my younger self, because it really is about storytelling. It's about being able to tell the narrative of the things that you've been able to accomplish, the experiences you now have, the characteristics and the capabilities you've acquired, and do it in a way where it's really to the point I just made. You're telling your story. It's not being boastful, but it's knowing your worth and the qualities and the experiences you can bring to an organization or to a role, and being very clear about what you've learned as well as what you gained. There are some learnings that you've gained, and being authentic to yourself and to your what it is you aspire to do. I believe storytelling is the best way, having a narrative and understanding that the journey continues. When you're telling a story, it's not with a definite end. You're on this journey to learn, to grow, to develop, and to contribute in a very intentional way.
I love your answer that storytelling doesn't necessarily mean that you're boasting or you're bragging. You're telling your story and you're doing it very intentionally, which I love that. I really hope everyone really heard those words. Can you share any successful stories, either from your own experience or from general observations of executive sponsorship that have yielded positive careers? And I know for me, I've been a huge beneficiary of executive sponsorship myself over my career.
Yeah, it started very early in my career. I was an HR professional at the General Motors company. And I remember a leader coming to me one day at the end of the workday and having a conversation. It was actually my direct leader. And he said, "Valerie, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I smiled because I thought I'd grown up. But little did I know that I had a lot to learn. And I just spoke something, even before I realized what I was saying. I said, I want to be the best leader I can be. And I want to have all of the experiences I could have. And I know that we're looking to move associates into global roles to take on international assignments. And if that opportunity presents itself, I'd love to take that on. 6 months later, I was moving to Argentina. So the power of speaking your truth, it really can bring things to reality. And from there, I went from Argentina to a next assignment in Germany. And I've had amazing mentors, those same individuals that took me on my first international assignment and really helped me to understand who I am and what I bring to the table, are still part of my personal board of directors. That's what I call my mentors and my sponsors who have continued with me along this journey. They're my personal board of directors. I still reach out to them. I still provide support to them. Now, when they call on me to speak in their companies or in their university relations, I say yes, because they said yes to me and they were great advocates for me.
I love that you term your circle as your board of directors. I actually often call them my kitchen cabinet, and it's and I think that's so important. It also just reiterates that you don't have to have just one. You can actually have a board or your own kitchen cabinet. So I love that answer. Can you share how executive sponsorships may enhance opportunities to serve on boards, whether it's nonprofit boards or even an opportunity to serve on corporate boards?
Yeah, it's amazing what relationships can and will do. And I encourage people to make sure their board of directors, their mentors, their sponsors include the complete diaspora, that you have people that don't look like you and haven't had the backgrounds and experiences you've had as part of your mentor network and your personal board of directors, because they can help influence getting you exposure and visibility into company opportunities as well as board opportunities. I've had the pleasure of serving on multiple not-for-profit boards, and it really does help build your leadership capabilities as you're serving in a governance role. I recently joined a corporate board, so publicly held company board, and all of the experiences and learnings I've gained from my mentors and my experiences throughout my career help to inform how I show up in support of board appointments. Again, whether it's a not-for-profit or a public board, it has really helped me. And again, I still rely on that network of mentors and sponsors, because there are things I'm experiencing for the first time on different public boards that I really need to gain some insight from those that I feel like I can go to and ask those questions that you wouldn't want to ask those that are around the table in the boardroom. You want that trusted advisor committee to go to. But I will tell you, having the exposure and visibilities to mentors and sponsors from different industries help to get you in front of boards that are looking for candidates to bring on to their to board seats. So it's critically important. It's relationships. It's those connections and those networks that you form early on, and they have to be authentic and genuine relationships, because people are putting your name forward, and that's their equity that's going into that as well.
Well, great. Thank you, Val. And I love the fact that you talked about how this not only helped you get on nonprofit boards, but eventually got you on a corporate board. So our audience that are board-ready candidates, I hope you're listening very closely to Valerie's comments. With the last 30 seconds that we have, what would be your advice for our Latino corporate leaders who are looking to get noticed for executive sponsorships at their companies?
I would say start with know your worth. You are enough. Your experiences are putting you in different places, and be open to your career trajectory being reimagined, that it is flexible, that it can take pivots and take you into opportunities that broaden your scopes of responsibility and gain different experiences. I would tell you to be very intentional and purposeful, that every engagement can be a meaningful and lasting engagement that can take you to where you aspire to be. So make sure whenever you have the opportunity to tell your story, that you're doing it in a way that others can take your story and share it with others.
Great. Well, Valerie, thank you so much. It was really great talking to you. And thank you for sharing your insights. Valerie Love with the Coca-Cola Company. Thank you again.
Thank you again.
All right. Okay, so now our final panelist, speaker, is Lisa Robinson. Lisa is the Chief Operating Officer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Wells Fargo, where she's responsible for the strategy, data insight, and implementation of DEI programs across areas of focus, including focus on business outcomes and measures to drive the effectiveness and sustainability of diversity efforts. So without further ado, please welcome Lisa Robinson from Wells Fargo.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's great to have you here, and thank you again. We appreciate that. So, Lisa, let's jump in. Can you share your experience rising up the corporate ladder, and can you talk about whether you had the support of mentors or sponsors or a combination of both?
I had the benefit of having both. I'm a 28-year veteran of Wells Fargo. I'm out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was hired by my first sponsor, who I thought I had a very terrible interview with him. We just didn't click. But I realized when we shared openly about the experience that he was like, I was watching you, I was excited about you, and I wanted you to come aboard, and I didn't want to show the excitement. However, he gave me so many lessons from day one about how to proceed in Wells Fargo. And one of the quotes I still remember to this day is, "You will die alone in this company." And that sounds really harsh. But what he was saying is that it's not just you. It takes a community. It takes advocacy. It takes engagement. It takes putting yourself in the middle of the conversation, being more vulnerable to drive results collectively with your team and partners. And I love the term board of directors.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yes. Board of directors or your kitchen cabinet, I think those are all.
Kitchen cabinet is great too.
I've always used that term now, kitchen cabinet.
Or kitchen table.
Yeah. So, can you talk about how important is it to receive executive sponsorship as you rise up the corporate ladder?
Well, I think it's both. It's a relationship. Somebody's watching you, somebody's encouraging you, somebody's challenging you, and putting a voice to your name in a room that you may not have access to. And as I shared, my first sponsor, one of many, curated my name and challenged me in my workplace, but also challenged and encouraged me in spaces, again, where I was not yet at the table, not yet at the kitchen table. And it provided a real powerful engagement and a feeling of worth, from Valerie's comment of, your worth. And he was supporting my worth, and he was supporting my voice and challenging me to say what I really wanted, where I wanted to go, and that I was wanted in the company. So I think that was really powerful, to be wanted in a space where you might feel a little bit intimidated. I mean, Wells Fargo is at the time that I joined, it was a statewide bank. Now it's a $2 trillion company, global, and being able to rise and have sponsorship through many different dimensions, different business units, different functional units, to be able to give me exposure and opportunity and challenge to be able to be in the space I am today.
That's great. Well, congratulations on your achievements. Can you share your perspectives on the difference between a mentorship relationship versus executive sponsorship? And does executive sponsorship evolve from mentorship, or does it happen independently? Or a combination of, or some kind of combination like that?
Well, it is interesting. So we put a name to mentorship. Mentorship is much more of the term that I was used to growing up in the company. Sponsorship is nuanced, but I think that sponsorship has always been there, and I do think it's different. For me, sponsorship is somebody that has vested time and energy in you. I think mentorships, and we've had a lot of mentorship programs over the years, and mentorship seems a little bit more finite, less relationship oriented. That's in my experience. But sponsorship, where I've gravitated to, I realized they were my sponsors because they were emotionally and solidly behind making sure that I had the experiences and lifting me up. And again, I say challenge as I was making my way through my career. So I think that mentorship can be more formal. And then sponsorship is, again, I think the term earlier was equity, is that they have equity in you and your worth and your rise and performance throughout the company and experiences that you want.
Great. What are your thoughts on the balance between showcasing or illuminating your successes while not appearing like you're boasting or self-promoting. And it's something that we often hear a lot, particularly within our communities of color, to say, just let our work speak for itself.
Yeah.
Just let your work speak for itself. But I can tell you, for me, had I not boasted to or at least told my story. I love what Valerie said. Told my story to my executive sponsor. I don't know that I would have risen up the corporate ladder myself. But what are your thoughts on that balance between telling your story and letting people know what you're doing versus just letting your work speak for itself?
For the first probably 10 plus years of my career, I wanted my work to show up as, I'm doing a great job and people will notice. I was raised, and I'm sure many in the audience were raised, to be humble. You don't shine too much of a light on your performance because good performance will be rewarded. But I realized that if you don't tell your story, nobody else will. And there's a way to tell it with grace, not just, being very, what about me? And this is what I did and I did. It's really bringing that nuance and that storytelling, bringing people along about what you're bringing to the table, your accomplishments, your achievements, where you may have had challenges and failures, but telling that story and practicing telling your story and getting confident. It took me a while to get confidence and break out of, some of the, you don't brag. However, you have to tell your story, because if you don't tell your story, nobody else will. So it's something I've gotten much better at. I like a story. I like context. And so me telling my story opens up folks that I sponsor and I mentor to be able to share their stories as well and help connect dots on their career progression.
Well, that's great, and that's so important. I mean, I want to really hope that the audience, our attendees, are hearing closely. Don't be shy or bashful. Tell your story. No one else is going to tell it for you. You got to tell your story.
Yeah.
Can you share any success stories, either from your own and or from general observations? About executive sponsorship. I know you kind of first talked about how you got first hired by the person that became your sponsor, but maybe any other observations that you've seen, either your own or from other people?
Well, I think that throughout my career, I've had some great opportunities. This is a large company. I've been able to move around in different business units. And I've met new sponsors who were really interested in, like, why are you here? What are your experiences? You seem to be involved. I've been in a lot of startups and build outs and breakdowns in the company. And I think by asking questions, spending time with me, and me also raising my hand, it took me a little bit to kind of get those gears in, telling my story, and also raising my hand to say, I would love to talk to you. I would like to just spend a few minutes. Let's do a virtual coffee. This is before the pandemic, to be able just to have a quick personal chat. And I think that personal chats, personal exchanges actually mets out additional connectedness. Even if they're not uniquely in the room, they could be your peer partner. They could be someone that you yourself mentor. But throughout my career, I realized that those sparks of light and that energy and that passion and the interest came from relationships and making sure that I always have an open door, because I appreciate the door being opened for me. So I make sure that I have an open door. So that cross pollination, if you will, of relationships really makes you a much more powerful, much more confident, much more engaged person in the company and of value.
Well, great. So with the last minute or so we have left, can you talk about how this has enhanced serving on nonprofit boards or corporate boards through executive sponsorship?
Yeah, so it definitely translates to both the nonprofit and the private public sector, is that people see you on stage, they see your passion for your work, and then they know that you have extensibility, you have broad skills that can translate to other industries, that can translate to other boards, and being able to really showcase the expanse of the talents that you have. So I think where you show up, where you're taking stretch assignments, people are watching. And I think that's what everyone needs to understand, is that someone is always watching you, and that watch can lead to that next opportunity inside your company or another company, or to the public and private sector for board appointments.
Great. And then with the last 30 seconds before we bring everybody back to have a nice Q&As, what were your advice for the audience of Latino corporate leaders on getting noticed for executive sponsorship at their companies?
I think that to take the stretch assignments, if there's some committees, if there's a diversity, equity, inclusion, there's a lot of, public and engagements that you can get involved in. Think outside of just the chair that you sit in. Take that opportunity to be in front of other partners, engage in your passions that may take you a little bit outside of your lines, because people are looking at those committee assignments. They're looking at those stretch assignments. They're also looking for employees that are raising their hand and saying, I will help. I'll be engaged, even if it's not within your scope, be it a project, initiative, opportunity to speak. Those are the many opportunities to share more broadly your opportunities, your experience, and your talents.
Great. Well. Thank you so much. This was just a great talk, and we're just so thankful for for your support. So Lisa Robinson from Wells Fargo, thank you very much. So now what we're going to do is we have a lot of Q&A that has come. So we're gonna, if I understand right, I think we're gonna bring back everyone and we're gonna go through some of these Q&As and for the next few minutes. So here's one question that we have is this is actually a pretty good one. Can you speak more about your role as an executive sponsor, and how do you select talent to sponsor, and what attributes and competencies are critical, and what are your expectations? That's a good question. Like, how do you select someone to sponsor?
From my vantage point, Sid, I look to people who are curious, who have curiosity, who are interested in engaging. I've often said I have an open door. Anybody can reach out. And then once they reach out is establishing the dialogue. You heard me say in our conversation a moment ago, starting the process of putting a plan of record together. People who are interested in taking the time to be curious, ask questions, are individuals that I would definitely gravitate toward. And then building on that curiosity of starting to write down a plan, putting pencil to paper. Those kinds of profiles are people that I'm more than happy to work with. Just reach out. That's the key, is reaching out. And that's, it's not so much a screen, rather an indicator of your desire to engage. And then I respond in kind.
I would add to what Christopher said. He's spot on. One of the greatest attributes is curiosity. And I'm so curious, and I love to observe people. And when I have the opportunity to be in a forum or a setting, to see talent in their real environment and in their space, presenting or sharing some of the project work that they're doing, I keep a keen eye to capabilities that we're looking to hone in on. And I make a personal recording of some of those individuals, and I bring their names up in different forms to say, have we considered this individual based on something that I observed or what I've learned about their aspirations? I think they'd be a great talent to consider. And sometimes it's taking them out of what Lisa said before, their wheelhouse of what they have been grooming for over the years into a completely different space, just because we know they have the potential and the learning agility to move into a different space. So I think it's a bit of that being prescriptive, but also just being in a space and being very spontaneous of seeing some characteristics and some capabilities that would be beneficial in different opportunities.
Great. Well, thank you. And Lisa, did you want to add anything? Just
everything that was said before me was spot on.
Yeah.
I also look for enthusiasm and courageousness to raise your hand, to kind of jump in to ambiguity. I mean, that's a spark that I want to follow and nurture and help. And the door's always open.
So here's a question that's actually very, very true to where we are currently. And how does sponsorship look in a virtual world, in a virtual environment, as companies consider hybrid models? What is your advice on how to build these important relationships in a virtual or in a hybrid model?
I'll start. I mean, I think we've had 15 months of training through the pandemic to really figure out how to nurture relationships by phone, by email, by Skype, by Zoom, by StreamYard, to be able to be authentic. I mean, you can't be more authentic than in your home office with your Tiana over your shoulder. It provides a little bit more intimacy, probably more accelerated relationship. So I do think that we've honed some skills to be able to nurture and continue to nurture virtual relationships as we get on the other side of this new norm and what those relationships and the physicality will look like going forward.
And I would just add, and as I have said before, is about being very intentional and purposeful to maintain relationships, even when you're not together in a room or in a building. It really does require you being intentional about reaching out, staying connected, making sure others are aware of the things that you've been working on, but also you're reaching out because you want to know more about what others are doing. So it's a shared interest in sharing your story, but also hearing from others. So as was mentioned, this 15, 16 months of being virtual has taught us a lot.
Yes.
That you can still be as effective as you need to be. And I would just say, making sure you stay relevant. Don't be silent. Find ways to stay connected in new projects in very intentional ways. So that's what I would share.
Yeah, to build on my colleagues' comments, these digital platforms like Microsoft Teams and other digital platforms allow for a frequency of interaction that you would not ordinarily be able to in a typical brick and mortar scenario, where if you want to engage with others, you have to travel elsewhere, for example, it might put in some impediments, whereas using digital platforms actually can be an enhancer, an enabler of mentor-based relationships as well as sponsor-based relationships. The frequency, the interaction, the comfortability of getting to know somebody in their home environment can be a great value add. And the frequency of being able to use the digital platform, the ease of using the digital platform for these types of engagements with sponsors and mentors can be very valuable, extremely valuable.
Great, thank you. Well, one last question, and I'll probably make this a lightning round. We got about 90 seconds, but can you talk about how you can leverage executive sponsorships if you're looking to transfer into another department at your company? Is that a good strategy? And should you be looking linearly as within your department for that level of sponsorship? But how would you handle that if you're trying to transfer into a different area within your company?
I would start by saying, let's make it organic. If you're interested in a different function or a different department, identify someone you like to reach out that's an influencer in that area and start with the conversation to share why you're interested in the role, learn a little bit more about the department or the function, and let it evolve into a sponsorship where that person is learning enough about your aspirations and your capabilities that they now want to take that on and be an advocate for you. So I think making it more a naturally organic building of that relationship instead of going into a session and saying, hey, I'd like for you to sponsor me. Allow it to grow and nurture.
Yes, I agree with Valerie's comments. That very much so resonates with me. The organic term she used in a way that allows for the natural ebb and flow of connection and reaching out and saying, here's my interest, but doing so in a natural way versus it being scripted. Having to use the term we used earlier, the operative term of curiosity, genuinely curious about the space, wanting to share about yourself and your own experiences professionally, and then having a dialogue born out of that, the curiosity about the opportunity, the willingness and desire to share with others, and then born out of that could potentially be opportunity.
Great. Well, this has been great. I really want to thank Christopher Fernandez from Microsoft, Valerie Love from Coca-Cola, and Lisa Robinson from Wells Fargo. Thank you so much for helping to kick off our HACR executive programs with the power of executive sponsorship.